This is Between Hook Sets. I'm Jason Walter from In Through the Outdoors with my partner in slime, Kurt Underhill from the Fishing Crew.
What is going on?
Gary Owens.
What's going on tonight, buddy?
Yeah, well, okay, so I'm going to play this because I missed the hook set. For those that tune in for the hook set, here you go.
Oh.
All right. So there's the hook set. All right. So we're having technical difficulty tonight. I've got my Gary Owned headset on, and no, this is not hee-haw, but we've got a guest tonight. I'm just going to forego the frivolities because Ron can only hear us because we've got him on the phone rather than video. So Ron Schara is joining us tonight. Ron Schara, thank you for joining the program. How are you?
Well, I'm doing fine. Frustrated because of our technical difficulties here, but the show goes on.
Yeah, the good thing is we can always figure out what to do. We just can't see your wonderful face. Although, if I do this, and Ron, you can't see it. Nope, by golly, Ron, all we're getting is your back and Raven's back. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of you facing us, so maybe I should go grab one to make sure that we've got one.
That's the better side of me anyway.
Right. Yeah, right. I think the only problem is here, Rob Burrell's probably going to hack on you a little bit or on us, on all of us for not having the technology figured out and make it work. But nonetheless, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk pheasant hunting. I've got my Frankie in the back, and I've got my shirt, and I've got my vest, and I've got my ammo box, and I'm getting ready for pheasant hunting. We're opening this weekend in South Dakota. Minnesota has already opened. North Dakota's already opened. Interesting numbers. 1.2 million pheasant harvested last year in South Dakota. And
well, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I just was going to say, and number two behind South Dakota would probably surprise us. I had my little piece of paper in my pocket, and I switched. I've got the South Dakota State University Pheasant State hoodie on. And now I'm trying to remember. I think it's
Iowa.
Was it Iowa that came in at 600,000?
Yep.
And South Dakota at I believe
1 point something million.
But was it okay? I thought it was 54,000. Or North Dakota had maybe 200,000 or 300,000. So anyway, Ron, you've had a great career in hunting and fishing. I don't even know where to begin with you because things have just been. They've been fantastic for you. Maybe we should start with MN Fish real quick because you guys just made a change to the board. You're still on as president, and Steve Panaz is there is he the secretary?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then you added a couple of new people. You added Gary and Tom Newstrom. So
yes, that's correct.
So you're
to our executive board.
Yeah, you're not necessarily going in a big different direction, but John Peterson stepped down after serving since 2018, and you guys are going to have a little bit, just something different in the organization.
Well, John's staying on the board, but he just felt our vice president should be maybe a little closer to the Twin Cities because we have meetings down here with DNR, etc. But he was a great co-founder, and so we'll go on here, no problem. And we can continue with Minfish, but just want to tell you just up front that my first South Dakota pheasant season was in 1966, and I want you to ask me about that later.
Okay, we will not forget, Kurt. Now I'm a little bit more forgetful than I used to be, so Kurt, it's on you.
I got it.
Not let me forget. So, all right, and I'm making a mental note of that. But MN Fish has been a huge organization, giving back in millions of dollars, if I'm mistaken, right?
Well, we started 6 years ago, and as an organization, interestingly enough, despite the fact how big fishing is in Minnesota, it's a $4.4 billion economic engine in this state. There was no organization that represented anglers in the legislature. So we organized and filled that because it dawned on a lot of us that our legislator, legislatures. As time has gone by, and you're going to find this in South Dakota too, fewer and fewer of them actually fish or hunt. And obviously it's probably more true in Minnesota, but that's what was going on. And so fishing was, there wasn't even in their plans. And so we realized our fish hatcheries a lot of them were dilapidated. They needed a lot of repairs, modernization, etc. The St. Paul Fish Hatchery is 125 years old.
Wow.
And it's been upgraded a little bit, maybe 20, 30 years ago. It's so decrepit the school kids aren't allowed to go there to get a tour of fish culture. I mean, I'm just setting the scene here. Our public accesses have changed because boats have gotten bigger. There's power loading now, whatever. And so, and there's 3,000 boat accesses in this state, and a lot of them are just not usable or very difficult to use. Some of them don't have docks, some of them don't have toilets, blah, blah, on and on and on. So here's what we did. We hired lobbyists. We spent $40,000 a year, and we're a nonprofit, so we're scrounging around asking for donations, but we spend $40,000 a year on lobbyists. And that's the best thing we ever could have done, because they go around the legislators and you get 15 minutes to argue your bill or tell these folks about what you're trying to do. And make a long story short, Governor Walz was invited to one of our, what we call a Minfish Summit. And I was, going to introduce him as president. And well, before I introduced him, I went into my spiel about fishing is economically important, blah, blah, blah. And he heard all that and stepped up and said, "You're right. We, Minnesota and the legislature, are not investing in fishing." And so he put $115 million in his budget, recommending it for hatcheries and public boat accesses. Our bill, Minfish bill, was somewhat less than that. And by the time the legislature got done, and still was a historical amount, we got $98.2 million to go for fish hatcheries and public boat accesses. That's a historical number, and you should know it's not even going to cover it all, but it's going to make a big dent in modernizing our fish hatcheries.
Wow!
So that's a quick history of Minfish.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Super, super impressive. And South Dakota, you're right. We're behind the ball the same way. We don't really have a lobbyist group that represents. We have the South Dakota Wildlife Federation, but not really anything that does with fishing. And we need that. I mean, we're a big fishing state. I mean, that's what South Dakota fishing and pheasant hunting. I mean, that's what we do.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Fishing is a big thing. Now, pheasant hunting, on the other end, Ron, I should just ask you, are you able to hear Kurt or not?
Very faintly, but I can hear him if I concentrate.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Because I think I'm trying to figure out how to connect us all three together. But
I'll go
on in the speaker in the background. Let's what was that, Kurt?
I'll go on the handheld mic.
Oh yeah, you're on the handheld mic. So let's talk about Pheasants Forever. You had a hand in. Oh, you're actually one of the, if not the founding member of Pheasants Forever.
Well, not really. It was organized. Pheasants Forever was started by Dennis Anderson and some of his cronies, and I watched it form or wrote about it when I was with the Star Tribune, and I became a life member. And I'm amazed and very tickled with the progress that they have made over the years as far as acquiring wildlife habitat, grasslands, and all of the things they do in the name of pheasants. And what was interesting is I told Pheasants Forever, we campaign, we need more pheasants in Minnesota. We need more pheasants. Well, a lot of people think, oh, you want more feathered targets to shoot, so they're not going to raise a finger for that. But when you start telling folks that we need more grassland, pheasants like grassland, but we need more grassland because it also improves water quality, soil erosion, blah, blah, blah. then people start paying more attention, and it's not just we want some more feathered birds to shoot. So that's an interesting tweak of public relations there, and getting people concerned about grassland, not necessarily for pheasants, but for the other benefits of grassland.
Okay. Well, I guess it's pretty doggone important. If South Dakota State thinks it is, they're all about the pheasant. We're, of course, in this state, all about the pheasant hunting as well. Your pheasant hunting was big with Minnesota Bound. You kind of covered everything in Minnesota Bound, didn't you?
Yeah, well, it was a variety show, storytelling. We covered everything from places to go in Minnesota or even beyond. We've done many South Dakota stories too. I was there for the when they reenacted I think it was 1908, 1909, something where in Huron.
Yep.
No, in Redfield.
Redfield.
The first introduction of pheasants in South Dakota.
Yeah,
but yeah,
the 100-year
storytelling. Sorry,
the 100-year pheasant deal. That was a couple years ago, or maybe it was 125 or something like that. They did
125, right?
It was like 1907, 1908, somewhere in there.
Yeah, there's a great history behind it. If you Google it and look it up, there's a fantastic history about that. And is it the triangle? I'm trying to remember what that Gettysburg winner, that whole, I can't remember what that's called, but there's a great history of South Dakota pheasant hunting, and it starts so early.
Well, here's an interesting sidelight. When we were out there filming the anniversary and the celebration of that in Redfield, they had 6 pheasants they were going to release, which is what they released way back 100 years ago. And I looked at these pheasants. They got them from a game farm, of course, and they all had these bands on their beaks so they wouldn't peck each other. And I told the guy, I said, well, before you let those go, I said, you should really take those, I forget what they're called, but
blinders.
Blinders.
Take those blinders off. And he agreed. And so I just knew this would happen. He opened up the crate and reached in to grab one, and away it went. It flew. It flew away. So in the actual reenactment, they only let 5 go. But
So
what's that?
So in 1908, they released 6 pheasants in Redfield. That was what they released.
Yeah.
That's it. Wow.
That's what started it all. From then on, South Dakota was starting its glory into pheasant hunting.
And now look at it.
That's incredible to think that this all started off as 6 pheasants.
Yes. Well, and I think, other people followed suit later on, but it all started with 6 pheasants.
Yeah, and I wish I could remember the story. I did a episode or 2 about the history of pheasant hunting in South Dakota on my In Through the Outdoors, and it's truly an amazing story how it got started. I think one group, a farmer or something of that, brought some in, and I can't remember it, so I better not get into it because I don't want to get things wrong. But I'll try to find the episodes from In Through the Outdoors and share them in a link so people can listen and get the quick 90-second story or 2. I think I had a part 1, part 2 on it. So pretty neat. Talk about Raven. There were 3 different Ravens, but talk about the original Raven.
Well, I've had black labs for 50 years, and I had a lab named Kyla. In fact, she had a heat stroke out in South Dakota near Pierre when she was about 9 years old, and never seen that before. We tried to, anyway, make a long story short, I took her back to the hotel room, gave her some water, whatever. I had to go to the governor's. They had a big banquet that night before the governor's hunt on a Friday night, and I came back to the motel room, and she looked at me and didn't wag her tail. And I woke up early in the morning, and she was no longer around.
Oh, no.
And she passed. And so I called a friend of mine from the South Dakota Game and Fish Department, and she, make a long story short, she is buried on the banks of the Bad River.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anyway, from that, I got a hold of a dog training friend of mine, Tom Docken here. I said, I need a dog. He loaned me a female to use for the rest of the fall, and said she's going to have puppies. And would you like one of her puppies? Because I thought she was a great little hunting dog. I said, well, yeah, I'd take one of those puppies. So that was the first Raven. And then Raven was 6 months old when I did show number 1 on Minnesota Bound. And she was in the kitchen, February day, cold. She was in the kitchen, and we're trying to figure out, what should the set be? Should I be by a fireplace? You know, should I have a kitchen table with a big fish mounted over behind my head or whatever? My wife said, why don't you have Raven sit next to you? And so I did. And the camera guy said, that doesn't work. She just looks like a pile of black blankets with a couple of eyes sticking out to the camera. He said, is there something bright and colorful you can put on your dog? And I walked down the hall of our house, and there on the coat rack was what I usually called the farmer's red handkerchief.
Sure.
So I looked at that. I said, well, that might work. So I put the handkerchief on Raven, came back out. The camera guy said, that's perfect. And little did we know we had created an icon. And then during the show, I just, kind of jokingly said, and the star of the show is Raven. And everybody loved that. Anyway, and that started it all.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. It, like you said, it's iconic. When you think of Minnesota Bound, you think of Ron Schara. I mean, instantly, and I'm going to pop the picture up here real quick. I think of you with Raven, and this picture is one of my favorites from years ago. It's the one where you're walking away. You and Raven are walking away, and you're looking down, and Raven's looking back up at you. I think that's just one of the best pictures of you guys ever. There are the one where Raven's a pup. There's some great ones, but that one is just simply the best to me.
Well, thank you for that.
So Ron Schara Productions, 9 Emmys. You have been doing this for a long time. Interestingly enough, my program director and one of the guys I worked with in Faribault, Minnesota at Pop Power 96, Rob Burrell, hooked us up tonight. I just want to mention Rob's name. It's interesting, though. You look at a picture of Rob today, or look at a picture of me today, and look at a picture of us back in the late 80s. We definitely don't look the same anymore.
Well, if you're trying to set me up, I'm not going to fall for the bait.
No, I'm not. The only thing is, you mentioned 1966, and I hate to say it, but that's the year I was born. Which was a good year. We everybody's getting older by the day. So does age matter? No, because in here, I think sometimes I'm still 16. Sometimes I'm 12 because I get a little immature because I like to have some fun. And my friends point that out. But I'm, for the most part, inside, I'm 25. Ron, you have to admit, aren't you still inside 25?
Well, I have always said that men don't mature. And on my calendar, I create a calendar for Minnesota. I got one for the Dakotas, etc. And on April 23rd, my birthday, I always put in there Ron Schara's birthday. He intends to mature next year.
I love that. Yeah, right.
I'm gonna tell my wife that one.
Yep, then we should all put that on the calendar. Yeah.
That's the free beer, free beer tomorrow thing,
Right. Yeah. Yes. Right. The free beer tomorrow that just never happens because tomorrow never comes. Right. Because it's always today, kind of sort of thing. Yeah.
Let's hear about this 1966 first time in South Dakota pheasant hunting.
Yeah. Well, here's a little history. I was a student at Iowa State University in my senior year and taking up fish and wildlife biology combined with journalism. And as it turned out, the editor of the South Dakota Conservation Digest, I never knew him, but months before I graduated, he committed suicide. And so, there was a job opening, and somehow the folks from Pure Game and Fish heard about me, and I went out there and talked to him about the job. And I got the job. That was in June of 1966. So now fall comes. I'm an Iowa boy, so I never had hunted South Dakota. So now fall comes, And my boss says, Ron, I'm going to send you to Platte, South Dakota. Here's what I want you to do. Find some non-resident pheasant hunters, take their picture, and then send it to their hometown newspaper. That was the extent of our marketing back then. So
wow. Okay.
I go to Platte, and I find a bunch of non-residents there in the motel. And I don't know how much time we got, but one of the guys in the motel room, his door was open, so I went up to the door and got his attention and introduced myself and told him, I said, if you get some pheasants tomorrow, I want to get your picture. He goes, oh, great. He says, I'm so excited. He said, I just picked up my pointer from the trainer in St. Louis, Missouri. This boy was from Alabama, and he had quite a drawl. And he said, well, great. I said, I'll see you tomorrow. Great. So tomorrow came, and his door was open again in his motel room. So I went up, and I'm real happy. How'd you do? Did you have a good day here? And he's got a cocktail in his hand, and he says, oh, damn. I said, what? He says, I let that damn pointer out this morning at 11 o'clock, and I ain't seen the son of a bitch since. Anyway, other hunters, I tagged along with some guys from Missouri, and they were very disappointed. Now, the forecast, South Dakota's 1966 pheasant population was down compared to earlier in the 60s or late 50s. It was down. So they were bitching because it took them till from noon to 3 o'clock to get their limit of 30 birds.
Oh my!
Me, an Iowa boy, I'm seeing more pheasants than I've ever seen in my life. I couldn't understand what made them so unhappy, but that was my first experience.
Well, they were definitely spoiled. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of us go to South Dakota, you get spoiled because sometimes we overhype the anticipation.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? I remember when I moved here in 1991, I left Faribault and Rob and came here. And the first time I ever pheasant hunted, I grouse hunted like crazy when I grew up in North Dakota. That was rough grouse and sharp tail and partridge. And so the pheasant thing, I'm like, well, we'll see what this is all about. In the first field we stepped into, the sky went black. I've never seen so many birds in my entire life. And so, it was good through 92, 93. I think we started to flood. Things got a little different. And it doesn't seem like we've got the pheasant population we had back in the early 90s or maybe even the late 80s. But last year we were invited to hunt a secret spot and the sky turned black again. So I got to see it one more time, and we're going Saturday. So
yeah, I once when I was the editor of Conservation Digest, I wrote a story about, because we had all these newspaper clippings that went way back. I went through them all. South Dakota has had high and low pheasant numbers all through the years. Some of it was weather. Some of it lately now, maybe the last 10, 20 years. A lot of folks don't know your eastern South Dakota is not what it used to be pheasant wise. That's because it's starting to look more like Minnesota. Right. Soybeans and corn everywhere, very little grassland. And so you have these, and then there are other issues. Way back when, a lot of residents said when they couldn't find pheasants, they said the non-residents are shooting them all. And so it was comical, and they still say that. That's how you guys ended up with a special opening for just residents. I find that atrocious, but that's what they did.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
I mean, really. So pheasants have always been controversial. I mean, I talked to ranchers who, when they were kids, they were told to walk the fence line back home after school, leaving the bus, and step on all the pheasant nests because they were picking up their young corn, stuff like that. So, but South Dakota, you're blessed with the right kind of soil, right kind of climate. There's a rancher friend of mine west of the river who he is a good farmer, but he farms with pheasants in mind. And I've been with him in early December when I would see 1,000 birds in the air.
Wow.
And they're all wild. He doesn't
And
put anything on.
I think you hit it right, Ron. It's cropping patterns. We go to no-till. I really think pesticides have a lot to do with not producing our chicks. We're spraying so many pesticides nowadays that we don't have the insects for them chicks to eat.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that. A lot of people still blame predators, but I tell you, pheasants and coyotes and red fox, and they've lived together for 100 years. And if you got the right habitat, the impact of predation is minimized. But after I left South Dakota and got a job with this newspaper here in Minneapolis, the big issue was your game and fish department had two divisions. They had a land division and a wildlife division. And the land division was supposed to manage the land based on the recommendations of the wildlife division. Well, you can imagine how often that maybe didn't work. And so it finally came to a head before your commission. And your land manager, he stood up and said, they asked him why he mowed so much of wildlife area near Huron. And he said he mowed all this tall grass down so that the fox couldn't sneak up on the pheasants. Well, that did him in.
Yep.
I think he didn't last long after that. But that's some of the thinking that was going on back then.
Well, and I truly believe, like you said, your friend West River. I have a friend. I live in Pierre, and they've got a farm 7 miles east of Pierre, and his father-in-law farms for pheasants. I mean, you walk in the cornfields; they're dirty. The fence lines are dirty. I've literally pheasant hunted. I've walked pumpkins and shot pheasants on his place. I never in my life have I walked a pumpkin patch and shot pheasants. Well, we did at his place. And it's all wild birds, and it's thousands of birds every time we go out.
Well, the formula is really simple. If you have good grassland and some winter cover, food usually isn't a problem. There's enough scratched up. There's seeds. The pheasants do well. But I remember also blizzard days in South Dakota. I went out and picked up dead hen pheasants. Their mouth was full of ice. But pheasants are very prolific. So enough of them survive. And if you get some roosters around and you get a good spring, they're very easy. They can easily replace themselves and more. And South Dakota is just in the perfect climate area to do that. And history speaks for itself.
Yeah, I remember 1997, the blizzard of 97. We were driving around picking up pheasants over by Cavor, South Dakota, taking them to our buddy Scott Neighbor's house. He was putting them in the porch, getting them back, and then letting them into the barn. And he was throwing out corn all winter long, and the pheasants were living in his barn that we picked up offside the road in that ice storm.
That's a good story.
That was a
bad year. Yeah,
and we were driving all around the place to grab pheasants off the road that were literally frozen with their mouth frozen shut, sawing them out and then releasing them into the barn. And he was throwing corn out all winter for the pheasants. And we didn't save the population, but we, mitigated some of the damages by doing it.
Yeah. Well, it was a bad winter. I had to buy a snowmobile to get home that winter.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was. And we chased a bunch of coyotes because the coyotes were all over the pheasant. In the back 40, back 80, whatever you want to call it. It was just amazing. It was tough. A lot of dead pheasant laying around. But
when they're opportunists, then
right.
Pheasant is in a stressful situation. Of course, the coyotes they want to eat too. So there you go.
Yeah, you can't hold it against them. Mother Nature is the one that caused the problem and created the situation. So we all had to deal with it, right? I mean, we all did. The horses were stuck in my barn for, I think, 3 or 4 days. and they ate the brand new 2x10 stalls. You know,
Yes.
it was storming. There was nothing you could do about it. You know, those horses had to do what they had to do, and they ate the clean straw, and then they went to chewing on 2x10s. You know, and luckily there was the door was open, and so they must have licked snow and got water that way, because there was no way to get to the pump jack. And I don't think I had it on a timer. I went out and manually did it and filled the tank. So, you know, but tough conditions, you know, whether you're a pheasant, a coyote, a hunter, or a farmer, a horse, or a cow, you know, it's just crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank gosh we don't have those every winter.
Oh,
Sure.
Yeah.
Who knows what this winter's going to be like? I decided to worry about it when winter comes, and we'll see what happens. Deal with it, you know,
well, what's interesting is usually south of the interstate, they don't get quite those blizzards you get up in Aberdeen and
right.
Pierre and up through there.
Yep.
You know, I have what was the story? I had another story here on my mind. I can't think of it. I'll think of it in a little bit.
So, Ron, you've been coming out to South Dakota since 1966 pheasant hunting, and you know you have all these years, and you have the ups and downs. You know, when, like, everybody talks about the glory days. When was the glory days in your mind?
Well, like I said, in 1966, they said the population was down, and I saw more damn pheasants than I'd ever seen before. Well, you know, the glory days, if you look at the history, the early glory days, before I moved to South Dakota, was during the soil bank days.
Yeah.
They called them soil bank. There were so many pheasants, South Dakota had no idea how many they had. And the soil bank started to go out, and there were so many pheasants declining that South Dakota didn't realize pheasants were going down because it took so long.
Wow.
And then the next time when the next boom in pheasants in South Dakota and Minnesota, for that matter, Iowa also, and nobody mentions Nebraska. Way back when, Nebraska was competing with South Dakota for numbers of pheasants. Now they're not even mentioned, but they're a sleeper. I'll just tell you that. But the next one was when CRP came into farm programs. That's when pheasants boomed again. I remember around Miller. I used to hunt around Miller. There would be all kinds of CRP ground there, and you were welcome to go hunt it. And pheasants all grassland. I mean, it was just wonderful.
Sure.
Now, the last few times I've been to Miller, all of that CRP is gone. So you can't continue to have booming pheasant populations when you don't have grassland. It's that simple. But I just thought of the story I was going to tell you. A few years ago, I was hunting by myself around Huron, and a farmer friend of mine always welcomed me on his land, and I was trouncing around. I can't remember exactly how I did, but I pulled up to this little dry slough. It was real small, and I stopped for some reason. My dog was kind of sniffing around, and suddenly at my feet, this big old rooster took off, and I jumped up and picked him up, and I'm petting him, looking. You know, every one of them is so beautiful,
right?
And I'm kind of stroking his back, and I felt something like some metal or wire. So what the heck is this? Well, here, this pheasant had been radioed. He had a radio on him, and he was banded. So I got a hold of the game and fish people in Huron. I took the radio back to him and the band, and they looked him up, and he was ending his third year, which is old for a pheasant. You know,
right.
Wow.
Very few of them live past or even reach 2 years of age. So he was very old, and this was right near the tail end of the pheasant season. He'd have made 3 years through 3 different pheasant seasons if I hadn't gotten him. But I thought that, and he hadn't. I told him where I shot him, and that pheasant hadn't moved maybe 300 yards from where they first put the radio collar on him.
Really?
So I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, interesting.
That's crazy. I remember when I was in high school, we shot a couple of them guiding, and my dad took them home, you know, and he threw them on top of the freezer in the basement and forgot all about them. And then one day the DNR showed up at our house, game fish, said, "Can we have our collars back?"
Yeah, right.
And I was like, "What are you? Oh yeah, there's 2 of them downstairs on the freezer."
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, you talk about pheasant being, maybe 2 years old for the most part. I felt old a half an hour ago at 58, but now 116 in pheasant years. Look at my ankles. that's just truly amazing. Hey, Ron, it's great to have you on the phone. I wish this is not how I wanted you to remember Kurt and I and Between Hook Sets doing this show over the phone. It would have been fun to have you on video and to be able to see you and see your reactions. And I hope someday you will join us for a second time. We'll work on it ahead of time and make sure that we can get the video for you.
Yeah, Zoom would work and you could see me, but frankly, I don't have my TV makeup on anyway. So
I don't either. So I just learned that makeup just makes me look just off. I'm great.
I'm naturally good looking, of course, but as compared to Rob Burrell.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's got a little gray, hasn't he? Sorry, Rob.
We've become an old fart around the office now once in a while, so that's good.
It's amazing. We're all getting a little bit older, but we've got great stories to tell and great stories and memories and things to share. It's been great to have you on the program. I told you 30 minutes, it's 36, but you kept talking and we were very happy that you did. And I know that maybe we took you away for a night of something on a Wednesday night, but we really appreciate the time you spent with us. Thank you for being really patient and understanding and just saying, hey, let's do this thing on the phone. And we did it on the fly, and it was a ton of fun. It was great to have you. Hopefully next time we'll get you for 30 minutes and be able to look at you and look you in the face while we're talking. But
hopefully I can figure this system out next time, or we try a different system. But put this in your pipe. I'm a turkey hunting nut. I shot my first turkey in the Black Hills in spring of April 1967. I have a ton of turkey stories in South Dakota and Minnesota. I've hunted turkeys all over the country, but we could talk turkeys next spring.
Yes.
I'd be happy. I'm all in for that.
Yep. We are all in for that because I know we've got. Well, I hate to say it there, but Kurt's a bit of a turkey himself, so it'll work perfectly. I mean, it'll be wonderful.
Well, thanks for having me on.
You betcha, Ron. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.
We're excited to have had you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yep. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Oh, yeah.